Hello, hello, everyone. It is Kenyon here. I am here to give you something different again. This time, I'm going to be doing a mid series check in rather than a series preview because we're a little late on the series previews, of course. I am today joined by TJ from Georgia. Uh, I met TJ through the Twitter Space verse, if you want, and he's been a great, additive to some of the discussions. Of course, he is a fan of the Atlanta Hawks, who are facing the Boston Celtics. But we still do talk sometimes about the Raptors. Today, we're going to be talking about the Atlanta Hawks, though. So, with that being said, TJ, did I do a good job of introducing you? And is there anything else you want to talk about yourself?
I guess to get some familiarity, I am a NBA fan. Um, I was raised in Georgia for most of my young life. I was originally born in Florida. I'm a military veteran of the United States Army. I also was uh, writing for a couple of smaller area papers, one in Texas, one in Georgia. Just some stringer work, no big time stuff. But I got a chance to get familiar with just sports overall, the makeup of how teams are put together, the grind of just being able to participate, with the art of participation, group participation, and then of course ultimately learning about the function of cold hard finances, which is when you talk about professional sports, you can't dismiss the importance of the dollar when you're talking about how teams progress and regress, because the money is a form of motivation, even though the sport is organic.
Absolutely. Sometimes the only color that matters is green. or for Canadians, it's different because our money is kind of rainbow colored, but
That's right.
for you guys, it's the greenback. So, I took a quick look. I've been watching the series. I have been watching a lot of basketball actually recently, even though the Raptors are done, which is okay. And it's given me a lot to reflect on. You are now, as we film this, 2 games into the series in the first round. And just to give you a quick few numbers that's interesting. So the Atlanta Hawks are down 0-2 in this series. What is really interesting to me is number one, it seems like you guys are trying to win the possession game. And that's really interesting because in theory, you are winning the possession game. So the first game, really quickly, it was 112 to 99. And then the second game was 119 to 106. So you are actually, the offensive trend is going up, um, basically game over game, which is interesting. Here is the peculiar thing for me. I'm noticing that you guys have outshot in terms of putting up shots the Celtics by about between 12 to 20 shots a game. And so to me, that speaks to it's kind of weird to decipher these numbers because it's like you're getting more shots, but you're not capitalizing on those opportunities. So could you speak to that at all?
Well, and to speak to that, you would need to allude to a change in philosophy by the new coach Quin Snyder. He has placed more emphasis on rebounding, particularly rebounding on the offensive side. So to your point, more rebounds mean more possessions, mean more shot attempts. The curious part of the event, and then we can talk about it in relationship to the play-in. When we played Miami, we dominated Miami on the board, and we were able to get scores up early. If you remember, Clint Capella had 20 boards, maybe 4 points, but his ability to round board and limit offensive possessions by Miami led to a bunch of shots by the other team and pretty much a lot of ease of getting the ball up and down the floor. Now, to Boston's credit, Boston has adjusted by using a smaller lineup, meaning that they're not so much worried about giving up possessions as are they to frustrating the primary ball holders of the Atlanta Hawks, specifically Trae, Young, and Dejounte Murray. And if you look at the shot attempts, you look at the few shot attempts that were taken by the front court versus the back court. If you look at the top 3 shooters on the team shot attempt, it's Trae Young, Dejounte Murray, and Bogan Bogdanovic. And you would think, okay, well, that's cool, but the disparity is such a big disparity that you're like, okay, well, we're not getting points down low. That means we're not getting foul attempts. We're not stopping possessions. We're basically chucking it up. And if you're not making your shots, and Boston, to its credit, has strong defenders in Malcolm Brogdon, Marcus Smart, who are going to make shots hard to get. So you may have more shots, but you're not converting more. And so now the real question is, how are you setting back on defense when you're giving us all of these attempts from deep, as opposed to your front court? Because your front court is kind of out of camp because they're either spread out on the wings waiting for catch and shoot opportunities, or they're caught unawares because you're forcing the shot up. And the transition is tough to make because now you're not in the floor of the game.
I think those are all really good points. I think one of the things that I'm noticing is Trae seems to struggle for whatever reason. And he's usually really good with his vision, particularly for someone who is not 6'5". He's not Dejounte size. His
Right.
vision's really good, but he seems to have struggled with post entry passes this series. I don't know if you've noticed a similar trend, and it's very very interesting with that. The other thing with
Well,
Trae, yep,
I wanna,
mm-hmm,
and maybe when I give you a suggestion about that, you probably notice that you haven't just really accounted for it.
mm-hmm,
When I mentioned the smaller lineup, Boston specifically placed Derrick White in the starting lineup. And Derrick White has been guarding Trae Young. Derrick White is about 6'5" with long arms. Trae is being frustrated by Derrick White because Derrick White covers space and he uses his full length. So the quickness that Trae is used to having, Derrick is funneling that. And then you also got Marcus Smart, who's a very aggressive defender. So you're also being worn down. So to your point about Trae, I don't want to say Trae is being baited, but in some form, Trae is such a determined individual that he may not understand that discretion is the better part of valor. He may be better off giving that ball up a lot more because he's at a size disadvantage, even though traditionally he is the primary ball handler. And we've talked about it in some spaces before. He may be better off in this series receiving the ball and catching shoot opportunities rather than trying to dictate the offense because they specifically look to say, look, we're not going to give you what you're looking for. We'll limit what your choices are, and then you decide.
absolutely. So yeah, Derek White is someone that I was going to get into in a second. He's someone that I've noticed he is able to shoot the gaps very very well and stick to Trae when Trae, like you said, would normally have a speed advantage. I've also noticed, just to kind of backtrack a bit, that in the at least the games that the Atlanta Hawks faced against Toronto, while you guys did win this season series, I did notice that you guys struggled against length. So this is something where I thought that Boston would, have their advantages because they are a bigger team. One of the things that I've also noticed with Trae is that he is really, really excellent within the mid range, particularly with his floater game. But I've
Right.
noticed that he's kind of gone away from that. And so that's something that to me is very interesting. It's something that I've noticed where usually that's actually where he really excels. I know sometimes we've talked about shot selection and compared him to Fred at times, but one thing that Fred doesn't have versus Trae is that mid-range game, and Trae has usually been fairly elite in that area. So I guess you would probably. I guess my question is, do you think that that's still a Derek White issue?
Yes, but then let's give a better assessment to the way that they are playing us. Al Horford is the starting center for the Boston Celtics in this case.
Mm-hmm.
His ability to front uh, a guard like Trae, as opposed to maybe a guy who's a little bit more traditional, like Robert Williams, is it makes a difference because you got Capella. Capella's limited in his movement, and the next question that you run into is, okay, Trae, who's your primary guy on pick and rolls? It should be Capella, but unfortunately, if it's not working because he didn't have the ability to step out and hit a jumper, now you're kind of forced to pick your poison, and you're wasting time because you can't get into your sets the way you want to. And so now this is where Trae kind of takes on that hero complex because the wings are sitting outside in stationary position. That's no good because they're not strong ball handlers. And now you're faced with, okay, I got Dejounte as a bailout scorer, but I don't want to put him in a situation where he's just trying to create every time he gets the ball. So to your credit, this is where I got to give Boston credit once again. They have aligned themselves well because they have a savvy center who knows how to play high up on the block, and then you have a guy with length who can definitely it's good for deflections, shielding, putting his hand in front of Trae's face, the little things that frustrate a guy who's trying to make a decision.
I agree. The one thing that I noticed when I was viewing some of the individual possessions, I might actually put some stuff on Twitter eventually, but one of the things that I really noticed, which was interesting, is there was a couple of missed opportunities that should have, in my opinion, gone to Saddiq Bey. And I know Saddiq Bey is struggling a little bit in the series, but to me, when you're wide open, your defender is away from you and facing away from you and focused on Trae, you would think that, yes, I know Trae really loves those lob passes, but to me, with all that length inside, I'm just
Right.
surprised that, Saddiq Bey
You're
is
not
not
aggressive
being
or being
utilized
aggressive.
more.
And this is the conundrum because why wouldn't the same thing apply to DeAndre Hunter? Why
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't the same thing apply to John Collins? And that is where you can argue that as a breakdown of the offense. Is that a Trae problem? Is that a DeAndre problem? Because I've actually seen, excuse me, Dejounte. Dejounte seems to be a little better at that right now, and it may be because of his length. My contention is that when Trae is in the lineup, you may be better served with having an additional ball handler besides those two,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to get more rotation of the ball throughout more series. Because you clearly said, okay, we want to possess the ball. That's going to make a difference in how we achieve success scoring points. Boston, and you must tip a hat to them, has said we got aggressive defenders who are going to frustrate your guy and force him to make hard choices. I don't think Trae should be put in that position because he's basically trying to create offense for himself and guys who are stationary. But if you get a guy like AJ Griffin, and you also mentioned Saddiq Bey, but my preference would be for a guy who can catch and shoot and put the ball on the floor like an AJ Griffin. And you're like, all of a sudden now Boston has to play more honest defense. They can't really pack the lane as they've done before. A lot of those back doors that you mentioned, or at least opportunities above the rim to catch and go, are present because they're not going to be so aggressive when guarding Trae. They're going to be like, okay, we gotta force ourselves to play honest defense because he's not dominating the ball, or whoever the point guard is not dominating the ball.
Yeah, and I think Trae has a tendency to be, how do I put it, more patient with allowing plays to unfold rather than, being more progressive with how he's processing the game. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just something that I've noticed. But within that, and to your point, you'd think that they would want more ball movement, especially since they are able to get more shots up. You'd want to, maybe if you get 5 less shots, you're still, getting more shots up, but you're getting better quality. And I agree. I would like to see more of AJ Griffin. I know that he had a very good play against his father's team earlier in the season.
Right.
And I've always actually liked his game. I know that there were some concerns because he was he dealt with injuries last year in college.
Right.
But I think he's a phenomenal player. I can't remember how tall he is. I believe he's
If we could probably say 6'6", 6'6" would be fair.
6'6". Okay, so he's not
6'6",
he's not
but
6'4" or anything like that. He's adding size to
no.
the floor for sure.
Well, he's not. The biggest thing you have from him is not the length,
Mm-hmm.
but the ability to get up on a guy. It's understanding his role. Because defensively, he's a first year player, so he's still learning how to play defense in the NBA, how to front, how to if he's going to play a bigger guy, how to stay behind him and play on his defense and not draw fouls. He's got a high IQ, so that's a plus that he has. But I mean, you're talking about a tense situation where decisions need to be made, and communication has to really be high. I'm
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with what he's done. as a player this year that he deserves minutes because I mean they inserted Saddiq Bey in immediately when he was traded. And truthfully, Saddiq Bey at this point is better at catch and shoot opportunities because that's what we asked him to do. In the offense, he might be reluctant to be more than that because he is not a vested veteran on the team. And that's not his natural inclination, which is to put the ball on the floor all the time. I mean, if he's going to do that, he's pretty much a bull in the china shop. He's going to the rim strong. And that can, that's kind of you got to know how to finesse it when you're playing a good hands defense like Boston. They know how to deflect and create opportunities for themselves without causing fouls. So the concern I have really is, do we encourage Trae? Because to speak to Trae's attitude on the court, Trae is a prober. If I had to use it in one term, he's always looking to find a weakness in the defense. That's why he's going to shoot those 30-footers, and they simply they're random, but it's almost strategic where he's trying to open up the court where he's trying to draw the defender out. And so if he's hitting those two, that allows him to get that floater off because now they have to come out and guard him instead of allowing him just to set up and pop those 30-footers at will. And so this is, again, credit to Boston that they're like this. If you're not hitting, we're going to stay back here. Because you're not getting those mid-range shots and you're not getting those fouls because you notice there's not been really many foul calls in the series so far. No. And in order to stimulate that sort of action, you are better off having another ball handler because Dejounte has at least done a better job of, as has Bogdanovich, even though Bogdanovich is traditionally not a guy who goes aggressively to the cup. He's more of a catch and shoot guy.
Yes. I mean, Bogdanovich can play make, but that's not his primary role right now. So, yeah, now I will get to Dejounte in a second. Because as you know, I'm a big Dejounte fan. Big fan of his. But just to finish off the Trae stuff, I do want to say this. I think that there are ways
Wait. Oh. I apologize for interrupting you. We got to we got to give a fair, accurate description of what we're talking about Trae.
No, I'm about to defend him actually.
No. This is an indictment. He's shooting 35% right now in the 2 games.
Oh, okay.
And he's shooting 20, and he's shooting 23 from 3-point range. So that is indicative of the poor decision making and performance. This is not just, hey, he's missing a shot. You can argue that he's doing too much. I would argue that personally.
Yes, I think that's it. I mean, you went harsher than I was going to go. So,
but we say as fans, we have to see it what it is. I want Trae to win. I respect Trae's game. I also understand that he is maybe in this series doing more harm than good by his probing.
Yes, and I think the other thing too is that to me it always tells me. So I look at free throw numbers, and if there's a big discrepancy, because sometimes that can speak to a guy doing too much work, having too high of usage, and I just see right now, I'll just tell you, it's 69.2%, which is a massive drop from what he normally is able to do in terms of a free throw shooter. He's not a bad free throw shooter at all. That's a Raptors problem.
No.
Right. So that is something that I've found very, very. Now he is turnover prone, but he does generate a lot of assists. But what's interesting is that there's been a drop in both at a rate that still is not equal across both. So he's lowered his assists, but his turnovers have decreased, it hasn't decreased that much. So I'm wondering if some of the while he can be patient at times, I've noticed that there are some plays, and I'll probably put one up on the screen at some point.
Right.
There was one that I saw where he took a very long, I think it was like a 35-footer, very early in the shot clock. And at this time, what I saw was the play was still developing, and there was, I believe Dejounte was going downhill, I want to say, and someone else. I don't have it in front of me. And it was an action that could have led to something else. And so I'm wondering if he goes back to being a little bit more patient at times and letting those type of actions develop a bit more. I think he might be getting sped up a little bit too much by the length, and then that might be affecting his confidence, perhaps. I don't know if you want to offer
Well,
any
he's trying
thoughts
to.
on that.
I am making an estimate when I respond to that. I
Mm,
think that he's trying to reach a certain amount of time because, of course, you're working on the time clock. To Boston's credit, maybe his turnovers are down. You're correct. His attempts to pass or his attempts to dribble may be down, but those shots are up. Like I mentioned beforehand, Dejounte, and Bogey are the guys with the most shot attempts, and the disparity is pretty huge over the rest of the players, which is not a good thing. You don't want your
absolutely.
guards taking all the shots, especially with the percentage that we're shooting right now. We're shooting low 40s right now, and so that suggests to me that you are either being overwhelmed, which I'm going to make a contention that that is possible based on the way that the momentum of the game has happened. That does not mean that you're incapable. It just means that right now this team has said, okay, you know what? Since you're going to take the bulk of the responsibility of the offense, we're going to make you feel the weight of the responsibility of the offense. And you got these other guys who kind of sitting and waiting for catch and shoot opportunities, or they are not really reacting proactively or coming up with some solutions to kind of free you up, run a little backdoor, a double screen, something to take those guards out, knock those guards off the line, get them out of their game as well. And so I look at Quin Snyder in this regard and say, look, okay, you never really had a chance to watch this team for a length of time to coach them up. You've seen your guy's capacity right now. You see Trae's struggles. You've seen what he's good at. What you don't have is consistency. You had a good quarter in the second game, but as it was shown over time, he's going to labor. He's going to struggle with the decision making in the game. And when they come home, the sentiment is Trae's going to play harder because his home. His pride is part of what's going on here. I don't know if you've heard anything last 12 hours, but he had his maternal grandfather pass away. So I'm sure he's going to be emotionally driven to perform, you know. But it's going to be, it's going to be emotionally, I expect Atlanta to do well. Sustainment is going to be the challenge for that team in Atlanta because either they're going to be able to, I expect them to get a lead, I'll be honest. If they don't get a lead, I'll be very surprised. Now, tell me just really how good Boston is if they can knock down an emotionally driven team because that's really all Atlanta's got right now at this point is to pick up their emotional intensity. If they can sustain it, that would show me a true development of a team, but it must come with good decision making. And I suggest that a stronger handle be on the court as opposed to the left.
Absolutely. The other things that I've noticed, and so this is this is my attempt at defending Trae, is while he is sometimes a culprit of certain things, I do think that he's not alone. So I've noticed offensive stagnation, and not just from him, because he's not the only one that doesn't move off ball. There's other guys that don't move off ball.
It's a group
Um,
failure. It's a group failure, and
it's a
some
group
guys
thing.
who get paid some guys who get paid very well should be looking themselves in the mirror right now. And I'm specifically
Exactly.
talking about John Collins and DeAndre Hunter.
Exactly. And I think moving beyond the offensive stagnation, on the defensive end, there's been a lack of communication from what I've noticed, where you're not calling out back cuts. And the final thing is there's just certain fundamental concepts in basketball, like getting back in transition, boxing out, and so that's where I think that they can really show improvement again to not only get the extra possessions but capitalize on them. It's just those simple little small things, and you see them magnified so much in the playoffs, which is why I love playoff basketball because you really do see it just the intensity goes up, and every single possession can make a very big difference. So
Right.
to move beyond that, I don't think we need to talk too much about the defensive end. I knew that from a defensive end, Boston was going to be able to get a lot more done because, again, just a bigger team. And on the perimeter, they're struggling. But I will quickly talk about Dejounte Murray, who is one of my favorite players. I've been really impressed, although they've had to put him usually not as a point of attack defender, and I think that they're they're starting to do that more and more. But I've been really impressed with his ability to keep up with some of Boston's guards, and really, really get into passing lanes. And as I won't call him a roamer per se,
He's a
um,
roamer. He's a
but
roamer.
yeah,
I would tell you this. It's not many players when you watch them play that they kind of will themselves upon the opponent or even on their own players. He's a slight of build guy. He's not the biggest, strongest guy. But
yeah,
you never fail to see this man push through single coverage. He will he's not going to blow by a defender. He's going to muscle his way through a defender. He's going to slide through a double team. He's got the length to get a shot above a guy's defensive reach. And it's just very unique to watch because he has a smooth delivery, but it's almost a herky jerky movement, which is kind of funny to watch because you're like, okay, he's not fast. He's more deliberate in what he does, but the shot is smooth. The release is smooth. And you're like, okay, how is he able to get away with that? Which sometimes he doesn't, especially when he's taking on double teams and there's a help defender behind him that's bigger. He's going to suffer more from that because he's not as strong of a finisher as you would hope a guy at that length. He's going to get more touch than force when he's getting the ball up. But what he does well is he knows how to size his defender up real good. He knows how because he's got that great pull up game. He can get you midway in the pocket going to the hole and then pull up and hit a 12-foot on you, 8-foot on you, or he can get the step back. He's got a lot in his game, a lot in his bag.
yeah,
And the problem that we run into is, unfortunately, he plays the two guard. So they don't really run a lot of two-man action when he's in the game with Trae. And then this speaks again to what are the other guys doing when Dejounte takes it upon himself to go. Ideally, a guy like John Collins, you would think, would be roving around, playing the basket. And if you notice, the bench for Atlanta has actually been the more successful group with Dejounte. Players like Onyeka Okwangu playing
yep,
at center, Bogdanovich on the catch and shoot. DeAndre Hunter actually, for some reason, seems to do better with the second unit. Maybe it's because he touches the ball more, or he expects the ball because it's more of a free flowing offense with DeJounte. And you find yourself looking at the situation and saying, "This looks good. What's the problem? Why can't we get this done when the regulars are back on the court?" And then now it becomes, okay, is this the coach's hand on this? Is Trae's influence that strong? Is his hand that strong that they just play a wait and see game, or where is the temperament that
yeah.
says I want to do more? And
When the
that
two
is the
guys are
closest
on,
word.
well, yeah, when the two guys are on the court, what I've noticed is there's kind of a your turn, my turn in terms of the initiation of the offense. Now, from what I've seen, I agree with everything that you're saying. I actually think that in terms of the ball moving and the quick decision making and the ability to take advantage of the opportunities that have been created, I think Dejounte is one really, really good. And in terms of his herky jerky,
And they respond to him. They respond to him.
they
You
do,
cannot
they
ignore
do.
that.
And in terms of his herky jerky style, now my Canadian viewers, relax. I'm not saying he is this good, but it reminds me a little bit of Shea. However, I think Shea's a bit more smoother, whereas Dejounte's a lot more violent with how he, you know, is
Very
almost
deliberate.
more
It's very
staccato
deliberate.
with his footsteps and stuff.
Well, he's very deliberate. That's why I said if I had to describe him in a way, I would say he's willful. It's almost like you can see what he's planning on doing, but can you stop it?
Yes. Yeah. So, but again, like I said, to my Canadian viewers, I'm not saying he is as good as Shea. I know people get crazy about. I'm just saying it reminds me of Shea. So
Now, Shay,
I've always liked him.
I'm not familiar with Shay. Give me a
Oh,
better idea of who you're talking about.
Shea Gildress Alexander, SGA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all got my first name basis. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I want to make a caveat too. Interesting fact that this may play
mm,
a part of why Derrick White is doing so well against our guards. He, of course, was a teammate of DeJounte Murray in San Antonio,
yes, he
so
was.
he knows the game very well, and I'm sure the tips matter when they're talking about spacing and playing one another and switching off. So we can't discount that fact when it comes to, especially when so much offense is reliant on Trae and Dejounte.
Now, I'll say one last thing about Dejounte before we go to the next part of this, which is I've been really impressed. If you look at regular season to playoffs, usually there's a drop off. Now, obviously, there has been some drop off on his overall efficiency, but his 3 point shot has actually increased. I think he's shooting over 36%. And I mean, we will see moving forward. But that brings me to my next point. Y'all just hired a new coach, Quin Snyder. He is a former Spurs assistant, and he was I mean, he didn't get fired. He left Utah of his own free will. So I guess my question is that moving forward, because unfortunately I don't see. I think that you guys can maybe get a game, and there are lessons to learn from every single game and every single playoff series. But my question has to do with what do you do moving forward? What do you think needs to happen?
First, I've taken a very day by day approach. One of the first conversations we've had is I told you I didn't know how to gauge the effectiveness of Trae Young versus Dejounte as a leader on this team. And it would be premature for me to declare one over the other because they offer different skill sets.
Yep.
Uh, and so one also is a vested veteran where another one is a young veteran. And so I was like, now you have to look at it from the point of coaching style. What are you asking from your players? What translates in what you do? Utah was a shooting team under Coach Snyder. Mike
Yes.
Conley was a point guard who was a distributor. Distributor first, but he also could get to the basket and create plays. They essentially played with a totem pole at center. So their ability to create offense was not a problem being generated, but it was based a lot on spacing and good decision making from the point guard. The question that you have is how much confidence can Coach Snyder put in Trae? And I emphasize Trae, if for no other reason, that the one thing that Trae has that Dejounte does not have is he tends to have he's a much more streakier player from three than Dejounte is. Dejounte is a movement guy. He's going to get separation. That's how he gets his baskets.
Mm-hmm.
Trae can draw fouls. Trae can shoot threes. He can take over a game at will when he's hot. And more importantly, when that two-man game is running with Capello or John Collins, it's lethal because now you have to always protect the backside, which allows for those perimeter jumpers to occur that they've been trying to get. The only problem now is you're dealing with a team that has strong backcourt defenders and a coach who says, I'm not going to give you what you want. It's your job to figure out what you need. And I think his name is Chris Mazzulla, is the coach of the Boston Celtics.
Joe. Yeah.
Okay. And this is credit to him. He basically said, your best players are your backcourt, and I'm not going to give them what they want. Anything that they want, they're going to have to take it. And Trae's he's got an alpha mentality. He's a smaller guy. He's got an alpha mentality. And his mindset has been, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get us something. But it has been at the expense of efficient shot making in the front court, which unfortunately they have not been more demanding or dictated the offense. So in this case, the only person who can change that would be either Trae himself or the coach when it comes to juggling the lineup. Because I firmly don't think Trae is going to change his style. I think he's going to try to push through the problem, will through it, and it can work. I don't want to discount that. I think that if Trae is given more favorable matchup, that means he can't be on the ball all the time, but he can get ISOs and really create from that. But I think ball handling, returning to that theme again, is going to allow him those sort of opportunities. And more importantly, it's going to allow for more movement from the offense because they'll have to shift away from following him as the point guard.
Yep.
And finally, I guess going to Quin Snyder needs to see it to understand it, because if you've never really put him in that situation, you're only speculating his full potential.
Yeah, the other thing that I've noticed that I think Trae could do a better job of, and I think Dejounte does a little bit better of a job of this, is a lot of players catching and going into a triple threat is almost useless these days by comparison because you know how to guard it. What's now becoming more apparent, especially watching the Sacramento series, is that yes, there are some times when your offense breaks down, you need to go into a triple threat and do your thing. But catching the ball on the move, that seems to be the new way of creating advantages. And I think Trae is smart enough and also fast enough that if you could get him in a potentially off ball situation where he's catching it and going on the move instead of catching it, waiting, looking, surveying, that's where I think you can really get something dangerous, whether it
But
be
that
in
means
this
you
series or beyond.
right. That means you need a skilled passer to do that.
You do.
And so, okay, so look at my front court, and you're like, okay, who looks like they can do that
It might
on
be
the move?
Dejounte. It may be Dejounte, but or like you said, ideally getting another someone down low who could create for themselves enough to generate the gravity to open up those opportunities as well. So that
Right.
would be
And,
interesting.
and see that's where the conundrum comes from because they use DeAndre Hunter as a defensive stopper, so his value in the court is pretty necessary.
Mm.
Um, but as you suggested, he can't be a one-way threat because you already have two guys who are limited guys in their roles in Capella and John Collins. John Collins is a great athlete. John Collins is an active athlete when engaged, but this offense, for some reason, has said, we want you sitting over in the corner in the catch and shoot opportunity. And you almost dumb down his instinct to just be relentless around the boards. And it's unfortunate because there are times in game one, he was able to get early looks and early conversions. He was like 4 or 5 early on. But his effectiveness was limited because that's not where the offense ultimately went. You took those opportunities when you had them, but you couldn't feed him over and over again and dare the defense to stop him. It was more like, okay, here's a good opportunity to get your points in. And so it only had limited value at the end of the day. And it is played itself out for all of the forwards um, because they're not getting shot attempts up other than threes, and they're not making threes. So you failed not only in your ability to attack the basket, but were able to get alternative ways of scoring.
I think the other thing that's really interesting looking at this series before we get closer to a close of this discussion is that without Bogey and Dejounte, I think during the last game they shot, I believe it was 17% from deep. If you take those two out, which is pretty rough.
That is not NBA worthy. We're not going to be nice about that. I know you. That is
No,
not NBA. That is an entertainment league first, and if you cannot make the standard NBA 3-pointer third at the time, what are you doing?
yes. So I hope that they start to. I agree with you. I think that they do need to play AJ Griffin a little bit more. I think that they do need to look for some of those, some more side to side action. Actually, that's what I think that they need to ideally.
I
I
don't have
think that could help.
it's not so much side to side. It's moving. You can move the ball a lot easier.
Mm,
Um, to allow a guy to get the ISO because look, instead of one or two guys probing for lanes of the basket, now you have three. And because AJ can get to the hoop as well, he can also pass off if he needs to. You
mm.
have created dual threats at the wing where DeAndre Hunter is not ideally a guy that's going to be aggressive going to the hoop because that's not his natural inclination. AJ Griffin can pop and shoot. Same thing with Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson has a skill set, but he doesn't have the confidence to just aggressively attack the rim. You mentioned Saddiq Bey because as a veteran, he has had more experience doing that. But because he's with a new team, I am confident in saying that he's going to be a little bit apprehensive about that because he's trying to he's trying to be a good teammate. And
Right.
it will come out for selfish and breaking up the offense just because you're taking the risk that you think you can get a basket. Because if you can't, you're not playing. And he's trying to get his value up because he's going to be a free agent fairly soon.
There's also a trust issue there where you don't know if you trust a guy because he just got on your team. When the trade deadline happens, it's Yeah, I believe that's when it happened. There's 2/3 of the season already done, so there's limited amounts of time to kind of integrate a guy into your system.
Well, he's not Kevin Durant, meaning he has no there's no skins on the wall that say, hey, I've been here, done that. And
Yeah,
that matters when a new person enters the room. If you understand that his resume says give him room, make room for him because he's good enough, yes, you make room. Saddiq Bey says, I think I'm good enough, but nobody else does.
uh,
It's
yeah.
the room's divided. How about that? The room's divided.
Absolutely. So I mean, it'll be curious. I'm really curious to see what'll happen. With that being said, we're kind of coming to a close. Um, do you mind if I put, or would you like me to put your Twitter information
Yeah,
in
that's fine.
the?
That's
Okay,
fine.
so for those of you who enjoyed this conversation, definitely check out TJ. I will leave his information in the link down below. Everyone like and subscribe to the channel. And yeah, just keep enjoying for everyone else. Again, taking a little bit of a detour away from draft content because I've been doing a lot of draft content, of course. But there is more draft videos. I have about 3 videos on on a hard drive that I need to edit that have to do with the draft. So that is coming up as well. And finally, for those of you who are Canadian, I can't speak to Americans with this one, but it is tax season, so definitely get your taxes done soon. So, um, with that being said, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about or plug really quickly?
Yes, I'd like to make it aside. One of the reasons I was drawn to your board is a lot of the Raptor fans. You do a great job of analytically trying to break down the game, uh, the individual players, but also the team chemistry. Not so much the aesthetics, but just the machination, how the players think, how they might coincide together, things that might enhance the product or might in fact be the problem. And I want to encourage some of the guys and young ladies or ladies to also take a look intensely at the rosters of these teams because so many teams right now are in the same predicament that the Raptors are in. It's like we have talent, but at what point do we say we are missing a set skill versus we have enough to continue building? Because you have a building block in place with Pascal Siakam. You also have one in place with Nick Nurse, but of course the real question is are these products going to endure and ultimately improve? And that is the question that you have that's going to be asked overall because you have a lot of young athletes who don't have the accomplishments or they don't have the um, success on the court that says, you know what, we're going to continue in this direction. And you have to really assess whether or not these are the guys that are going to fulfill the promise that you hoped for when you drafted them. But I would definitely say look at teams far and wide. There are a lot of athletes that are maybe not in the spotlight, but they're doing a great job when they're in rotation, and they might just need an opportunity to emerge.
I mean, well, yeah, I think this offseason will be very interesting, especially with a CBA being, in principle at least, agreed to. Not in the whole term hasn't been out. I actually am one of those people who I read the entire CBA cover to cover.
Oh
When
wow, you're a bad fella.
Yeah, when I have the time, right now is probably not the best time for that when it comes out. But I've heard that it won't come out for a while, so that's good for me. But I do think that there will be some interesting moves that will happen, especially with teams like Milwaukee and the Warriors, who are going to be in that second apron. And basically, there's been decisions that are going to make those type of teams more punished if they continue on with that level of salary structure. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Also, just a quick aside, I think it's really great to see the fact that they are opening up investment opportunities for players. I'm always pro player, and always pro for that side of things, minus the gambling stuff. I'm not. I think that kind of
Right,
stuff.
right, right.
Yeah. But for in terms of being able to own whether it's WNBA or NBA franchises, I think that's really really amazing. So, um,
I think that
so
would
yeah,
be a great that would be a great future discussion because of, we are when you're talking about franchise and the WNBA has been a 20 plus year endeavor from the NBA, and there's been a question of licensing, there's been a question of salary disparity, and all of these things are real worker or employer employee discussions. But because you're talking about entrepreneurship, ultimately, this is a great transition when we're talking about, hey, these guys represent success. The American, well, I'll say it's the international model, the international model of success for uh, taking a sport and being able to allow it to encompass not only so many different worldwide communities, but being able to tangibly take what you have in the stadiums, but then outside to just distributors and vendors everywhere. And those players would know best how to talk about that because that's kind of how they live their life. You know, how about, from shoes to clothing to any sort of local venues they got going on, they would be the ones who would be able to best translate that down to their fellow sisters in
Absolutely.
basketball lore. And then also even to the smaller leagues when we're talking about the G League, since that is also a partner with the NBA.
Absolutely. So yeah, with that being said, we will definitely we'll have to have more of that type of discussion because I actually find it really interesting. But we'll definitely have to talk about it another time. At some point, hopefully, you will come back. Hopefully, and we'll talk more about the Hawks because again, this isn't Raptors Rewind; it's Basketball Rewind. So, with
Right.
that being said, I'm gonna put this to a close. But everyone, take care wherever you are. I hope you're doing well. And yeah, take care and peace.
Take care, everybody.